Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to a new deep dive.
Hello.
Imagine trying to steer a massive ship, but you don't have clear signals from every part of the vessel. How do you know if the engines are running smoothly?
Or if the crew's following procedures, right?
Yeah.
Or if there's, an iceberg you haven't spotted yet.
Exactly. That's kind of what managing a complex organization feels like sometimes. You need reliable ways to check things are on track and, well, risks are under control.
It's a constant challenge.
So today we're diving into a key framework designed to tackle exactly that challenge, the 4 lines of defense.
And its crucial partner, assurance mapping.
Yeah, this is all based on the material you shared with us, which gives us a sort of blueprint for understanding how organizations build these layers of checks and balances.
A really useful structure to think about.
Our mission is to explore this blueprint, figuring out what each line does, how they're supposed to interact, and maybe why assurance mapping is so essential for getting that full picture.
Yeah, moving beyond just definitions. Seeing how it works, maybe where the tricky bits are.
So maybe start with the basics. What is this 4 lines thing really about?
Well, think of it as a systematic way to analyze the different layers an organization uses to oversee, control, and review its activities.
Okay.
The core idea is really to build confidence that things are running as they should be.
So what's the fundamental purpose of setting up these, distinct lines? Why not just one big control department?
Good question. At its heart, the framework helps management understand the level of comfort or assurance each layer provides in managing risks.
Comfort level, go ahead.
And critically, it helps identify where assurance might be lacking, so you know what steps need to be taken by, say, later stages to compensate for limitations in earlier ones.
So it's about seeing gaps and overlaps.
Exactly. It's about building a robust system where different eyes are on the process.
And connecting all these layers, showing how they interact with specific risks, that's where assurance mapping comes in, right?
That's right. Assurance mapping is the tool that visually links an organization's principal risks directly to the specific control processes and key performance indicators, KPIs, that are meant to manage those risks.
So it makes the connections visible?
Precisely. It gives you a picture of what assurance you actually have against those risks occurring.
Okay.
And the material you provided also notes that understanding these concepts is considered important for professional development.
Right.
It even appears in qualifications like the SBL syllabus, part of a well-known business qualification, which kind of highlights their practical importance for, future leaders.
That context helps. Okay, let's start at the very beginning then. The foundation, the first line of defense. Where are we operating here?
This is the operational level, the front line.
Okay.
It includes the design and implementation of the overall risk management systems and control frameworks, sure. But more tangibly, it's the day-to-day controls built right into operational processes and transactions.
Like what sort of things?
Well, we're talking about things like ensuring invoices are matched to purchase orders before payment, performing regular quality control checks on a production line.
Standard operating procedures almost?
Yeah, or making sure cash is reconciled daily, or needing a manager's sign-off for, significant transactions, stuff that happens constantly.
And who is providing the assurance at this fundamental level? Who's making sure it happens?
The assurance here comes directly from the people doing the work, the staff operating these controls every single day.
So it relies on them.
Yeah, their knowledge, their diligence, their commitment. That's what provides this first layer of confidence, as the source material points out.
What's the key benefit of having strong controls embedded right here at the front line?
Well, the huge advantage is proximity. Staff are closest to the actual operations.
They know what's really going on.
Exactly. They intimately understand the workflow and are often the first to spot potential weaknesses or issues. Putting controls in place here is just the most efficient way to prevent errors happening in the first place.
Or catch them early.
Or catch them early, yeah. And strong controls at this stage also mean the information being generated for reporting, including financial statements that external auditors will eventually look at, is more likely to be reliable from the start.
That makes perfect sense. Catch problems upstream. But I can immediately see a potential issue. The people doing the checking are the same people doing the work.
Exactly. That's the primary limitation. The main weakness of the first line is that inherent lack of independence.
Right.
The staff implementing the controls are part of the operations being controlled. They are effectively performing a self-review.
Which is never as objective.
Never as objective as an independent check, no.
The classic self-review challenge. Okay, so if the first line is implementing and operating the controls, who steps back and reviews that work? This must be where the second line comes in.
Precisely. The second line of defense is where management review happens, or reviews conducted by specialists who are separate from the specific operational unit being reviewed.
So not the same team doing the work.
Right. Think of departments like risk management, compliance, financial control functions, maybe overseeing divisional reporting.
Or even the board sometimes.
Or even specific oversight activities performed by the board itself, yes. It could also be quality assurance teams doing checks after the primary operational checks have been done, like a second look at customer service calls after the initial review.
This sounds like it introduces a degree of separation then, maybe more objectivity.
It does. The second line brings some independence because the people performing the review aren't the exact same individuals or managers directly responsible for that operational process.
But there's a but coming, isn't there?
Well, yes. And this is a key point of practical difficulty organizations face. These reviewers are still part of the overall management structure.
Still insiders.
Right. Achieving true objectivity when you work alongside the people you're reviewing can be challenging. It often relies heavily on the organizational culture and the clear mandate given to these review functions.
And what are some of the other practical challenges at this second line level?
A big one is just ensuring the reviews are actually effective. This depends heavily on the reviewer's expertise, their seniority.
Do they know what they're looking for?
Exactly. And it can also be surprisingly hard to define a truly clear purpose and scope for these reviews. Deciding what to look at and how to assess it effectively can be a struggle.
So you might end up with reviews that are
either too broad, too narrow, or just lack real impact. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the operational controls and then management oversight stepping back a bit. This brings us to the third line, which is often seen as having a much stronger mandate for independence.
That's internal audit.
The internal watchdog.
Pretty much. Their role is to provide independent assurance that the first two lines of defense are functioning effectively.
Okay.
Their scope can be quite broad, depending on what's defined in their terms of reference. That's basically the official document setting out what they're allowed and expected to review.
So it could cover a lot.
It can cover operational efficiency, safeguarding assets, the reliability of reporting processes, and specifically focusing on risks that the first two lines might not fully mitigate.
Makes sense.
They're particularly valuable during periods of significant change, new systems, restructure.
Times of flux.
Exactly. And their effectiveness is strongly linked to how well their audit plan aligns with the organization's key risks. The source material actually highlights that assurance mapping is especially useful for internal audit in scoping and prioritizing their work.
So the mapping helps them decide where to look.
Yes, precisely.
So their independence is their superpower here. Is that the main thing?
It's their crucial advantage, yes. Internal audit is independent from line management and operations.
Even though they're employees?
Yes. While they are employees, their reporting line is typically to the highest level, like the audit committee of the board. This allows them to report their findings and concerns directly, even discussing sensitive issues without operational management present. That structural independence is vital for unbiased reporting.
But they're still on the payroll. Does that limit them in practice?
Absolutely. Complete independence is, an ideal that's difficult to achieve in practice because they are still part of the organization's ecosystem.
Internal politics and all that.
Internal politics can inevitably play a role, yeah. Their scope can also be limited by management, or the board may be designating certain no-go areas they aren't allowed to audit.
Really?
It can happen. And perhaps the most significant limitation is that while they can make strong recommendations, they lack the authority to force management to implement them.
They can advise but not command.
Exactly. Their effectiveness ultimately hinges on senior leadership and the board insisting that internal audit's findings are actually acted upon. If leadership doesn't champion their work, internal audit can, lose its teeth.
That's a critical point. Recommendations aren't the same as enforcement. All right, this brings us outside the organization entirely for the final layer, the fourth line.
That's external audit.
The ones who sign off the accounts.
Primarily, yes. Their main role, as defined by regulatory requirements, is to provide an opinion on whether the financial statements give a true and fair view.
Okay.
And to do this, they examine aspects of the business relevant to that financial reporting process.
Their key strength seems pretty clear from their position, totally outside.
Yes. Their main strength is their, unquestionable independence and impartiality. They're not employees.
Right.
They answer to shareholders or regulators, and they've a valuable external perspective plus broader knowledge from auditing lots of different companies.
That external validation adds credibility.
A significant layer, especially for external stakeholders, yes.
Where might they fall short, though, in terms of providing comprehensive assurance across all the risks for internal management's peace of mind?
Well, a key limitation is their limited internal knowledge compared to internal people. They only visit periodically, often just annually.
The fly-in, fly-out audit?
Kind of, yeah. Unlike the continuous presence of internal staff or even internal audit. And crucially, their focus is primarily on risks impacting the financial statements.
Audit.
So while they will note control weaknesses relevant to financial reporting, they typically won't deep dive into operational risks or non-financial controls unless they're specifically engaged to do so beyond their standard audit.
So other important risk areas might not get the same level of external scrutiny.
Exactly. Not unless it's part of a specific separate assignment.
Okay, so we have this layered system: operational controls, management oversight, independent internal assurance, and external validation. How does assurance mapping tie all these threads together neatly?
Assurance mapping is like the framework's central nervous system, maybe.
Okay, I like that analogy.
It systematically takes each principal risk the organization faces and maps out exactly what controls are in place at the first line, what management reviews happen in the second line, how internal audit has tested those controls or processes, and any relevant findings from external audit.
So you see everything related to one risk in one place.
Exactly. It shows, layer by layer, how much assurance exists against that specific risk. And it also links risks to those key performance indicators and other reporting, providing a clearer basis for confident reporting on risk management overall.
Let's use the computer security example from the source material to make this really tangible. The risk is unauthorized access.
Right. A classic important risk. If you think about the potential impact and likelihood without any controls.
Pretty scary.
It's likely assessed as quite high, isn't it? High impact if sensitive data is breached, high likelihood if systems are just wide open.
So the first line jumps in with what?
Exactly. The first line puts in the foundational controls, firewalls, password policies, user access restrictions, maybe training on cybersecurity best practices.
Keeping virus software up to date.
Keeping virus protection updated, regular system backups. Staff follow procedures for securing devices and data. These are the operational barriers.
Makes sense. What does the second line add on top of that?
Okay, the second line adds review and oversight. This might be the IT management team reviewing logs of failed login attempts to spot potential attacks.
Checking the checkers, almost.
Sort of. Or checking that backups are happening regularly, or maybe senior IT staff reviewing access permissions periodically to ensure they're still appropriate. It's management checking if the first line controls are being maintained and producing the expected results.
And after those first two layers are in place, how might the risk assessment change according to this framework? Does the risk just vanish?
No, not vanish. The source suggests that while the potential impact of unauthorized access might still be high, or perhaps moderate high, because a breach is still bad news,
Right.
the likelihood drops significantly, maybe down to low.
Ah, okay.
The controls don't eliminate the risk entirely, but they provide significant assurance that attempts are much less likely to succeed.
Then the third line, internal audit, comes in. What do they do?
Yes, internal audit provides assurance over the effectiveness of those first two lines.
Testing the tests.
In a way. They might try to breach the system themselves using common hacking techniques to test the firewalls and password strength.
Okay, penetration testing.
Right. They'd audit the IT department's procedures to ensure backups are happening correctly and test that management reviews of logs are actually taking place and issues are being followed up. They check if the controls and reviews are working as intended.
Got it. And finally, external audit's contribution here.
Well, external audit's role here is probably more limited to their financial mandate, as we said.
Right.
But they still contribute by reporting any significant weaknesses in IT general controls, like access controls or backup procedures, that they discover while performing their audit of the financial systems, because those weaknesses could impact the reliability of financial data.
Okay, so they flag relevant issues they find. The source also notes how KPIs fit in here for this example.
Yes, you'd link this unauthorized access risk to KPIs like the number of successful breaches, hopefully always 0.
Fingers crossed.
The number of failed login attempts,
Yeah.
which gives insight into threat levels, or perhaps metrics around patch management timeliness. Other reporting might be regular security briefings to the board.
And these KPIs become more credible if they're checked.
Absolutely. Quantitative KPIs, especially ones used externally, like figures about system uptime or security incidents reported, gain significant credibility when they've been subject to review or audit by internal or external assurance providers. It adds weight.
Bringing it all together then, what are the big practical advantages an organization gains from actually doing this assurance mapping alongside the 4 lines model? What's the payoff?
Well, it provides a really clear visual link between specific risks and all the various control activities and reviews across the organization designed to mitigate them. That clarity is huge.
So you can see the whole picture for each risk.
Exactly. This helps management and the board quickly identify risks where assurance might be weak, or maybe even non-existent.
Find the gaps.
Find the gaps. This leads to much stronger, more confident internal reporting on the state of controls. And it also drives efficiency.
How so?
By showing where there might be overlapping reviews, different teams checking the same thing, or conversely, where nobody is checking something important.
So you can streamline things.
Allows for better resource allocation for internal audit and management reviews. And by seeing the risk reduction achieved by the first 2 lines, internal audit can better focus their limited resources and scope on the highest priority areas, or those with the least existing assurance.
Making internal audit more targeted.
Definitely more risk-based and efficient. So yeah, this systematic framework, especially when visualized through assurance mapping, gives management and directors a much clearer picture of how risks are being handled and the confidence they can place in that whole process.
And the source mentions this helps directors feel more comfortable.
Yeah, the source material highlights that this structured approach helps directors feel comfortable. They are meeting their responsibilities for managing risk and using resources effectively.
Which is key for governance.
Absolutely. Which in turn allows them to report more confidently to external stakeholders, significantly boosting external confidence in the organization. It's a virtuous cycle.
It really does build a picture layer by layer. Thinking about all these lines and how they're supposed to work together, where do you think the biggest challenge lies in making this work in the real world?
That's a tough one.
Is it the struggle for true independence, particularly in that second line where reviewers are still colleagues,
That's definitely a big factor, the insider review challenge.
Or maybe ensuring internal audit has the real mandate and influence it needs to push for change, not just write reports?
Also critical, that lack of enforcement power we talked about.
Or could it be simply bridging the gap between the high-level external view, like the 4th line, and the messy day-to-day reality the 1st line operates in, making sure they connect?
That's a potential disconnect too, yeah.
It seems like each line has its own inherent limitations, doesn't it? And successfully navigating those relies on more than just the structure. Things like leadership buy-in and the organization's overall culture must play a huge part too.
Absolutely. The framework is a great guide, but culture and leadership make it work.
Definitely something to ponder as you look at how control and assurance works in your own world.